Morning, Alex. How are you?
Hey Rob, thank you for having me.
What position did you play on the rugby team?
Oh geez, how familiar are you with rugby?
Played in college a little bit.
Okay, yeah, so pretty much anywhere in the backs apart from scrum half. I kind of migrated further out as the level got higher.
So you started as scrum half and then moved
No,
out
I
the
was
line.
too tall to play scrum half. I'm 6'3", so I started at number 10 and finished up playing fullback or on the wing when the level got higher.
Oh wow, 6'3". So what was the nastiest thing you ever saw at a rugby drink up?
Drink up. Dude, I don't know if I wouldn't feel that comfortable sharing the whole thing. Nastiest thing at a drink up. I don't know. The usual stuff like, there'd be start of the season, there'd be little, I guess you'd call it hazing. It's probably like outlawed now, but wasn't never really got too gnarly. I saw a guy, we had a clubhouse right on the water here in Vancouver, and a rookie once got inserted into a garbage can and thrown over into the water. That was pretty funny at the time, but thinking back on it, a little stupid. But
I think the nastiest thing I saw, I can't remember if this is at Coast Guard Academy or West Point, but I think there were three guys lined up, all with their drawers down, so their asses were hanging there, and
mhm.
one guy beneath them. So they were like stacked on each other, and they poured beer down the top guy, so it drained down his ass crack, down his ass crack, down his ass crack, into the mouth of the guy on the very bottom.
Yeah,
That was the nastiest thing I saw. Certainly
yeah,
saw
I
stuff
can.
like that.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of beers been drunk through dirty old socks and similar things. As I won't go into the details, but there was a move called a bird bath, that you might be able to imagine. But
Oh, the bird bath. Okay. Okay, awesome. Awesome. So fitness culture with pro mountain bike riders. My only
yeah,
experience is, I guess, my experiences with pro mountain athletes. Don't think I ever worked with a pro mountain biker. I mean, when I say fitness culture, how many of them are excited, wanted, come in and work hard in the gym for you, or is it like pulling teeth?
yeah. No, I think well once they actually reach the level of pro, these guys that are signed up with world class teams going to World Cups. I see these kids getting themselves into the gym and busting their chops pretty hard. Like these guys are in there working hard and pretty much without fail, the more successful the guys are, the harder they're working, right? Um, so I think it's a question of managing their outputs rather than having to pull teeth to get them to work. Most bikers, even downhill riders, come from, I think, the background of an endurance sport, and while there is the um, kind of the culture of the sort of counterculture, Red Bull, Monster, energy drink. I don't want to work. I just want to be skilled. These guys are coming from backgrounds of having to work hard and suffer, and the guys that are really at the top of the game are working super hard in the gym. Yeah.
We had just by chance, one of my athletes was a high level cyclist, and he coached a kid who came to the gym, and this individual was riding on the Tour de France, and he was just in the gym a couple of days, but he was strong. I mean, they had him doing. He was doing some heavy front squats. He is really strong. Are these when you come to your gym? Are they familiar with the lifts at all? I know with endurance backgrounds, they probably don't have a lot of like college weight room experience. Is it teaching them how to lift and then get strong, or how many come in with lift weight room experience?
Everyone's different, right? Like I'd say that as time goes on, we're seeing more kids being armed with some gym education as they come up through school. But for sure, there's a large element of mountain bikers who, the gym is a secondary thought, and therefore we need to start with quite a foundational approach. Picking up their movement quality before we have to start worrying about intensity or complex lifts.
Have you, one of my experiences both with mountain athletes and the pro skiers I worked with was that the best athletes never really went all out in the gym. So the best ones on the, and I think I rarely is the best athlete on the field, the hardest worker or the best in the gym. It seems like they always held back a little bit. They would never, crush it. And on the other hand, rarely is the biggest gym rat the best on the field. Was that your experience where the most talented guys kind of held back in the gym when you're pushing them?
Well, it's certainly my experience personally. Like I tried to outwork a lack of talent through through pretty much every sport I played, right? But no, I wouldn't say that I see that necessarily. I think a lot of these guys are younger. The ones that we've got in our gym will be like under 25, and if you let them go, they'll jump straight into maxing out on their back squats and bench presses if you let them. But that's just, I think, being young guys. I think as they get older, perhaps the guys who are a little bit more experienced are gonna know how much they need to give in order to have the most resources for when it matters.
Got it. In terms of upper body stuff, I know that from this cyclist and others, there was a real penalty to having any upper body mass, just in terms of weight. So you're working with downhill mountain bikers and cross country and enduro, I assume.
Pretty
Is
much
that what?
all gravity, right? So not a ton of cross country. The cross
Okay.
country I tend to find a different pathway, but definitely with the enduro and the downhill guys, I heard one guy at a pre-ride sharing some concerns about putting on a little bit too much muscle, but his coach quickly corrected him on that one, and let him know that there's really very little detriment to it in certainly in downhill, and even in enduro. There's not a huge penalty to being a little heavier if it's going to help you to descend with greater durability, more movement efficiency through longer runs. Even with those big days that the enduro riders have to put in there, they've all got enough capacity to get around the course.
Tell me about your upper body training then for these athletes. Is it any different in terms of set rep schemes than you do for lower body? Or, I mean, are you training max effort strength, moderate intensity, probably not hypertrophy, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I think in the off season is definitely a place for hypertrophy. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And depending on their training load through the preseason, you can still keep that hammer down, and maintaining muscle mass, I think, is important for most athletes. I think you might, the Tour de France ultra endurance guys might be the exception to that, but no, I'm a big fan of trying to keep the muscle mass on and keep that strength as high as we can season round.
I haven't done a lot of work in terms of the fitness demands of downhill mountain biking, but I assume that a little bit of mass on the neck, shoulders, back would help with injuries. I'm just assuming, but I imagine most of the injuries are impact injuries, collarbones, stuff like that. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, no, you'd be right. Pretty similar in terms of similar to skiing, right? In terms of you're manipulating and cooperating with gravity as you move down the hill, which is quite different from a lot of our sort of field baseball sports where we're trying to overcome gravity and move quickly, create a lot of quick ground reaction force. So it's a lot more eccentric demand. And certainly like that upper body, that head carriage capacity, ability to keep yourself stable when you're in the choppy stuff, super important. And then absolutely it stands to reason that it's going to pay off for you if you find yourself coming up against a tree or an awkward fall, that having a strong upper body is going to pay dividends. Yeah.
Are there any common lower body injuries for these athletes that aren't impact?
That are not impact. Well, you just find overuse, I think, would be the main thing, right?
Overuse?
So when you're pedaling a lot, and then for mountain bikers, they don't have the same exposure to repetition as a road cyclist would, because they're moving around so much more on the bike. But you certainly want to look out for those things, and so we can really look to. It's an opportunity to look towards a lot of the road cycling literature when it comes to that overuse, that body position, those sorts of things, right?
So tell me about you said that you'll do hypertrophy in the off season. When does the off season start? Is it, I don't know what the seasons are for sure for on the competitive side. Goes with winter, I'm sure. So what, October when they stop? In November they get in there. When are they coming in to see you in the off season? Their off season starts.
Yeah, a lot of the races will finish in October, and that's usually for like the high level guys, right? Like the super competitive, the ones that are going to do US Open and the guys that are touring around Europe. For everybody else, it's kind of winding down, and the race season's done by late summer, and so you can have a little bit more of a break. Everybody tends to ride for fun for a little bit. There's a lot of hashtag all time fall time. People like to ride in the fall when the dirt's good and tacky and it's not too wet outside yet. People tend to chill out a little bit through the end of the summer, start of the fall, and then get stuck in once they've had a little bit of a break.
So they're
That,
coming in. when you first getting them in November, December, what are you working on in terms of programming? Is it do you do any of the endurance aerobic programming for them, or is it just on the strength side?
Yeah, two questions there, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, yes to the endurance program, and I'll sort of talk about the what do we do when they come in. We really want to clean up. There can be some collateral damage from the season in terms of injuries that have been picked up, and maybe we've been just trying to nurse them through the season, and we want to get a little bit more of a concentrated rehab program in there. With cycling, I said that the mountain bikers don't suffer from it as much as the cyclists, but that sort of postural adaptation that they go through from being on the bike all year long can limit your ability to extend at the hips effectively, abduct the hips. We can get kyphotic through the T-spine, and shoulder mobility can suffer. So it's a real good opportunity to run a screen, find out what they need to work on in terms of mobility, and get them really ready to train. Yeah.
Do you have a screen that you use that you developed, or what is your screen?
Well, my screen evolves all the time. It started from, I said, the first real good screen I used was actually working with golfers. I did a TPI certification a long time ago. And that kind of laid the foundation for me. And that was based off a modified SFMA, so the selective functional movement assessment, right? The Gray Cook thing. And so when it comes to cyclists, we'll look at that. Can you forward flex? Can you extend at the hips? Look at gross movement patterns first. If I've got somebody in person, and then we can just kind of hammer in on the things that sort of like focus in, I should say, on the limitations that we find in terms of if you can't get your arms overhead through an overhead squat, then what's the sticking point there? Is it your ankles, your hips, your shoulders? If somebody's online with me, then I'll just provide them with a pretty exhaustive list of go through the whole thing rather than giving them an if this then that kind of tree diagram to follow. So yeah, we look at what they're coming out of the season with, try and get them ready to train and move as healthy human beings, and then hope that we can keep them that way through the off season and into the start of the new season. And in season's obviously a little bit more reactive, but certainly trying to combat the effects of being on the bike 6-7 days a week is pretty high priority.
Will you are you a coach who will make sure everything's moving straight before you start loading, or do you just go ahead and do loading and movement together?
I'm a big fan of like good enough is good enough. Like, let's get you started, and we can continue to improve as we load. Sometimes you can use load to help people find their own restrictions and really shine a light on it. So pretty situational, but I'm definitely not. I'm not going to let being perfect get in the way of let's get you moving forward. I think it's a huge part of effective programming is keeping people engaged, and people are going to switch off if they're rolling around on the floor 3 days a week on a foam roller trying to get another 5 degrees of
Whatever.
external rotation in their hips, right? Like,
Right, right. I guess in terms of your exercises, are you do you have the compound lifts as your basics, or do you like lunges? Or tell me about your favorite exercises that you use, both upper body and lower body for mountain bikers.
yeah, super straightforward. Like, lots of time with the barbell, dumbbells, free weights. The responsibility for, especially for bikers, like we always talk about, like, are you still going to be a healthy mobile human when you're standing up and walking around? So the ability to come from a seated position and stand and fully extend at the hips. I find that the squats, deadlifts, bench press are pretty foundational with a lot of those human movements that we need. And then people will argue about the bench press sometimes in certain sports, but certainly there's no hiding from it with mountain biking. So those really form the foundation of everything we'll do. And then in order to try and hit and make sure that we're stimulating the sort of the connective lines from left to right side, we'll use unilateral movements, and then always try and sprinkle in some lateral plane and rotational movements, just in order to keep people, again, like, healthy and functional. And the more we do that, and I'm sure you find the same thing, the better we do at staying away from overuse injuries.
When you get them in the off season, how many days a week are they training strength with you when they first come in?
Really depends on the individual. Like, the majority of, like, guys and girls that I work with are amateurs. They've got day jobs, right?
Yeah.
So it's a question of finding out what there's two questions, like how much do you want to train, and what's realistic for you to put in a week. so that you can have a sustainable program. And then once we know what a sustainable workload is for them, we can then kind of allocate that time, right? So I'd say off season, 3 days a week of actual moving weights in the gym is a pretty good place to be. We can make that work with 2 days a week. Personally, for me, I've been keeping myself to just 2 days a week for a couple of years now, just because I need to get the extra time in on the aerobic side of things.
Got it. So on your 3 day a week program or schedule, tell me what those days are.
Well, again, it'll change for the individual, but it's going to be something along the lines of two days with the focus on the compound lifts, whether we're in a strength or a power or an explosive phase. Those are going to form the nuts and bolts. So like the first 2 days of the week are usually the good time to do that, because bigger endurance efforts tend to happen on the weekends for most folks. And then the sort of pre-weekend workout, whether that's a Thursday or Friday, is going to be a question of a little bit of cleanup for individual needs, whether that's shoulder mobility, people doing things like there'll be more movements like a Turkish get up would find their way in there, or maybe some landmine work to move up the planes and the kind of forces that the shoulders and hips are going through. We can get a little bit more creative, a little bit more individualized with those Friday workouts.
Take me into those first 2 days. Are you doing body part splits? Are you trying to hit lower total, upper every session? Get as
Yeah,
specific
so
as you can. Go
if
ahead.
I'm going 3 days a week with somebody and they have the capacity to kind of go relatively hard all 3 days a week, then they'll be on a 3 day body part split. If there's somebody who needs a little bit of back off on their volume, then they're going to be on like a 2 day full body Monday, Wednesday, and we'd have, for me, it's usually going to be something like a bilateral squat and a single sided hinge. Will be on the Monday, and then on the Wednesday we'll have your opposite movements. You'll have your deadlift and your Bulgarian split squat on those other days. And then in terms of upper body, similar kind of approach. I'll try and work in my overhead pressing on the days when we're doing some horizontal pull, and vice versa. And then try and get a little bit of core in at the end of each workout. Sometimes we'll throw in, there'll be some specific arm isolation. We talk about that upper body, and then some single joint lower body movements. I'm a big fan of hamstring curls. I try and get them in there whenever I can. I think it's an easy movement to miss for a lot of athletes' ability to flex at the knee.
So just so I kind of understand, they're coming in and they're going to do. Let's say it's the back squat is the first big lift, and then following that with single leg deadlifts to do the single leg pull, and then you're going to do maybe upper body bench press followed by horizontal pull up. Am I kind of tracking?
Yeah, yeah,
And then finish with some maybe some rotational core work.
yeah. That'd be pretty close.
Are you doing 1RMs with these guys?
I like to, yeah. When I think it's suitable, and I'm a big fan of giving people percentage based training blocks, so they can see that progression coming along, and it's just nice to have that measured approach. Interestingly, I've got a small class of bikers that I work with Tuesday, Thursday mornings, and we finished a block this week where I didn't give them specific directives on percentage targets for their lifts. I just gave them an easy, a moderate, and a heavy week. And at the end of the 3 weeks, I kind of canvassed the room a little bit, and I said, okay, guys, so how'd you do? How'd those strength numbers come along? Did you guys hit what you hit in the previous block? And there's no real mitigating circumstances that I can see, other than when I give them specific instructions on the weights, they're gonna push a little harder rather than moderate versus hard. So that was a good eye opener for me, that I think being as specific as possible with it is it's going to push them forward a little more.
Describe your easy, moderate, hard weeks. I mean, is that how do you define easy, moderate, hard?
Well, it's a descriptive term, right?
I guess I want to know intensity and volume.
Intensity and volumes. For me, as I'm picking up intensity, I'm almost always going to drop the volume. So like a 75% week could be 6 reps ish, and then we're going to come down to like a 3 1 by the time we're up at 80, 85, 90. So that's when we did our easy, moderate, hard block, the reps were kind of progressing accordingly with that, right? So I say to everybody, you're doing one less rep this week, guys. That's an opportunity to push a little harder if you think you've got it. So go for it if you're feeling it, and if you're not, that's okay too, right?
So let's say you're doing when you say, I guess I'm trying to figure out how you, because I understand light, moderate, heavy,
Mm-hmm.
but easy, moderate, hard in terms of strength training, I'm having trouble tracking. So easy would be fewer reps, same intensity. I'm trying to track.
It's gonna be more reps, lower intensity.
More reps, lower intensity.
In my head, it's gonna be equivalent to a 75% week.
Light.
But
Yeah. I
if we're
think I'm
giving
getting hung up on, you say easy
the
and I'm thinking
terminology,
light in terms of intensity, right? Yeah.
and yeah, I wouldn't get hung up on that personally.
Right, right. And when you're running, so you say you're doing a block where you do have a 1RM. Say you're doing and I'm assuming you're doing the same lifts throughout the block if they're doing a percentage based progression. And so let's say you're doing a 1RM, it's a heavy block. You're doing max effort strength or heavy. How many sessions do you generally run athletes before you progress? Like I'll generally run 2 for moderately trained athletes or for a lower moderate training age. I could do 2 sessions at the same progression before I'll increase the progression. But for
So
athletes with a high
you're doing like
training age, just go ahead.
so you're doing like you do an 80%, 2 weeks in a row. Is that what you're saying?
2 sessions in a row. Yeah, like so 80%, 80%, and then the next 2 would be 85, 85, and then 90, 90, like that. I generally do 2 sessions as a progression. That generally works for when I say training age, it's how long you've been training. The athletes who have a higher training age, they can't always do that because they'll be closer to their genetic potential when they do their 1RM. So sometimes they'll need to do 3 sessions before I progress. But for most, I'll do 2 sessions before I progress. What do you find? I imagine with these athletes probably are lower training age on the strength side, so you might be a bit more aggressive with the progression.
Yeah, I guess my question. Yeah, I would agree with that. My question would be, if you're doing your back-to-back weeks at 80%, is it same rep scheme both weeks?
Yeah, yeah. So and it's just 2. Well, it's when I say you're saying weeks, I'm saying sessions. So if we have like,
Yeah, yeah.
right, you understand? So yeah, it's 2
Would you do
sessions
two in a
before
week?
I. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
We do. We'll do 3. Depends on the cycle, but for a strength cycle, we'll do. I just designed a cycle this morning, and yeah, they're doing 3 strength sessions a week, and if back squat is every day of that, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like Monday and Wednesday will be the same progression, and then I'll bump up the progression for Friday.
Yeah, and you wouldn't waive it during the week. You wouldn't have have a heavy light during 1 week.
No, no, it depends on what the intent of the cycle is, though. But in the same, but I've done all types of different ways. So you can have like in the same session, the first lift is heavy, the second lift is moderate, and the light lift is a light volume or intensity. I guess intensity and volume go together, right? So the first lift is maybe 8x3, heavy. Second lift is 6x5, moderate, what I call moderate intensity, and the third lift is 5x8, which I would call light intensity for the set rep volume scheme. And then that's a way that we can train every body or every body part in the same and not worry so much about that. But at the same time, we've done all kinds of stuff over the years. We've done, like heavy every lift, heavy intensity, like full on powerlifting. So
Yeah,
we've done just about everything.
I'm a big fan of reading your lab rat studies, so I've been trying and keep an eye on those as time goes on. So that's super interesting. Yeah, no, I don't. I haven't got that sophisticated with trying to push the volume. I think that really when these guys are bikers, and yeah, I don't know, maybe you have the same concerns with your folks, but I really just I want the training to support their sport outside, right? So as long as I see that they're making moves forward within their strength, and we're not getting injury, soreness, fatigue getting in the way of time on the bike, then I'm happy with that.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's interesting. If and that's how come. Now you said you also do the metabolic training for them.
Yeah.
So how does that work for a downhill athlete? For I guess your downhill riders, what metabolic work are you doing for them?
Yeah, so highly alactic in terms of the performance energy demands, right? Like your 3 to 5 minute is kind of your average downhill run. There's some enduro tracks that'll push 10-15, but they're kind of outlier.
Just for me and I think for listeners too, can you define what I guess the three disciplines in terms of downhill, enduro, and then cross country, just so I understand that
Yeah,
we're talking the same stuff. Go ahead.
so a cross country race is going to be about 40 minutes to an hour, something like that. Everybody's racing shoulder to shoulder. It's start and you do a bunch of laps, and whoever finishes first is the winner. You're at the top of the podium. Enduro, I'll talk about downhill first. Downhill is super simple. It's a time trial format, right? Everybody takes their turn to go from top to bottom. They get timed, and the fastest guy to the bottom is the winner. And then with enduro, they're effectively taking something like 5 downhill tracks, and they're going to put them together in one race that'll take you the best part of a day to complete. And while you are responsible as a rider from getting yourself around the course, and it's a set course, you can't be taking shortcuts or anything like that. You're not on your transfers, right? So you do your first stage, you get timed. It's a little bit like how World Rally would work or something like that, right? You've got
Yeah, I'm not.
your
I'm
first
sorry.
stage.
I'm not tracking.
No.
You gotta slow down. Yeah. So how does it? I'm not tracking. So it's like not like enduro. Like they're. It's not like a long race where they do 5 downhills or something. There's something else going on. Explain
Enduro
it
is
to me.
Enduro is 5 downhill time runs. For example,
Okay.
could be 5, and but you might have to cover 35 to 50 kilometers in the day in order to link up each of those time downhill races, right? So
Ah,
you
so
have to
so you
have,
got to ride between the
yeah,
downhills.
you got to be able to cover the distance, climb the elevation, and then still have the matches left to give her when you're going down in your race stage, right?
How is that? Is it the total time that's
Yeah,
judged? It's the total time that's
it's
judged.
cumulative downhill times. You've got a start gate on each downhill stage.
Oh, it's a cumulative downhill. Is the cross country or is the distance between the downhill runs timed at all or no?
No,
Oh,
you just
really?
got to be self powered. There'll be at World Cup
Self
level. There
powered.
will be cutoffs for transfers. Like if you're too slow, you're out.
Right.
But for the average kind of weekend enduro race that you or I might sign up for, it's just kind of you're riding with your buddies, and then you'll wait at the top together, and you take your turn to go down. And that's why it's such a popular format, because it's really quite social. You get all the fun of the downhill, plus you get to spend the day in the woods with your buds.
At the professional level for enduro and downhill, are the downhill courses for the enduro as technical as they are for the downhill professional downhillers, or is the enduro not quite as technical downhill courses?
I think you're probably right that I think there would be quite a lot of debate about it, and they do change. It's enduro, especially, is still kind of in its infancy as a professional sport. It's really changing every year in terms of who's running the races, how many teams are able to show up, and. But I think that's a fair assumption. Yeah, the downhill, the World Cup downhill tracks are going to be a little gnarlier than your average enduro stage. Yeah.
Are the best professional enduro guys the best, or they have to come from a downhill background? I assume if it's downhill that's being scored.
Yeah, yeah. There's downhill is certainly the big show, right? Like I think it's where the guys are. It's the best TV product for sure.
Right. Yep.
It's been very challenging to make enduro a TV friendly sport, and as such, I think that there's more money in downhill racing. Having said that, like the enduro bike is what you or I are going to buy to ride around on for an average guy who wants a sweet bike to go trail riding on. An enduro bike's going to be far more useful than a downhill bike. But yeah, the in terms of like overlap, like athletes to athletes, there's a few guys that'll go back and forth and have. There's one of the local guys here, Casper Woolley, just moved over to downhill. He stayed with the same team, but he went from kind of getting, I think he might have had some top tens last year at World Cup downhill and World Cup enduro, but he had some good results at nationals, and so his team have actually moved him over to the downhill this year. So there's a few guys that are looking at opportunities to do that, and I think I think it shows that they're all kind of playing the same sport. It's just a question of finding your niche and your opportunity at the right time.
And the downhill bikes are heavier, right, significantly, and the downhill riders they're all armored up in their gear. Enduro's not quite as armored up, right?
Yeah, you're just not going to be as comfortable spending all day in the
Because you got to
downhill. Yeah.
right.
But having said that, I mean, if you look at, they just had a race down in Tasmania, like a season opener. It's a Red Bull event called Hardline, and that's the best downhill racers in the world there. And those guys, they're not hugely armored up these days. You know, they're going to have some spinal protection, some shoulder. But if you look at them, it's relatively low profile stuff, and it fits under. It's not exactly an aero suit, but these guys are looking pretty, pretty trim and pretty streamlined when they're coming down the hill these days. So.
Interesting. I'm sorry for interrupting. So go back to we were talking about your metabolic conditioning, and so I assume your metabolic conditioning for the pure downhill riders is different than for the enduro riders. Can you talk about your metabolic conditioning that you're doing for downhillers? You said that the events are about 3 to 5 minutes long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is how long
Yeah.
it takes to get down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me how you're doing your metabolic conditioning for that.
So the two main approaches you do have on bike work. Obviously, these guys are going to be out riding, and we want to make sure that they have a really big engine so they can for two things. So they can train a lot, so they can be out on their bike all day, pushing up and pedaling down, and also so they can get through the rigors of a race weekend, right? So by the time they get to their final race run, they might have done a dozen or more practice runs, qualifying runs, hiking up the trail to see what lines they're going to be picking for the race. So they do have to have a really good, strong aerobic base in order that they're not kind of running on fumes by the time they get through to the end of the weekend. Having said that, they don't need that high anaerobic kind of zone 3 stuff that you'd see the zone 3, zone 4 stuff that you'd see the cross country athletes going through. And more or less the same with the enduro athletes. They're not under a time gun to cover their distance, but they do need their alactic, their super high intensity, 6-second sprint work. They can be punchy uphill sections during a race, during a downhill run, and then predominantly it's your 3 to 4 minute efforts. So we tend to start with some efforts that'll be around that length. Sometimes it's in the gym. Quite often we'll use, this is where the rowing machine, I'm a big fan of the Echo bike lately too. That's been a real useful tool for us for the last few years. Ski erg's great because we're also looking at things like local fatigue points, like grip, shoulders,
Right.
bike position, really staying centered on the bike is important. So, making sure that you can hold that strong hinge position for your 3-4 minutes, or refine it once you may have lost it. So yeah, certainly lots of high heart rate zone stuff for durations of 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll do some mixed modal efforts with that. So it's kind of have a lot of fun when we get those circuits started off.
So like box jumps to row or something like that.
You can have box jumps, snatches. You can have, like row to bar, pull-ups. Pull-ups are a big one for us. But that horizontal pull is probably just as important. Try and spend a little bit more time with our kind of those elbows out positions. I'm not a huge fan of over specializing early in a program, but we'll definitely try and focus in people's attention towards that good riding position when we can with more specific movement variations. I guess I kind of got off track there from our metabolic stuff.
That's all right. So if are you plugging in metabolic stuff at the end of a strength training session, or do you have specific, cardio / metabolic sessions that they come in for? Or are they doing their aerobic base stuff on their own and then coming to you for the the 3 to 5 minute cardio or metabolic conditioning?
Yeah, it can be both, right? So with the amateurs, I like to throw in the metabolic conditioning towards the end of a workout, right? You get your 2-3 strength moves in, and then we'll maybe spend 15 minutes on some high intensity stuff with some recovery built in. Other guys like the folks who can put in their 3 workouts a week, especially as it gets closer to riding season. If they're still able to do that, then we can split and we can move their metabolic work there. But as we get closer, like as we do get back out on the bike right now, we're in Squamish and we've got about 6 inches of snow left on the ground here. So we're just waiting for that to melt. But as soon as that happens, I'm going to start getting messages from everybody saying, can I take this workout outside? And that's when you need to start explaining to them, sure, I want you to go and ride outside, but I want you to achieve these things with it. So I want you to, you know, choose this fire road climb instead of the single track climb so that you can do some intervals on the way up. There's guys who are they'll be ski touring too right now, and if it's a weekend ski tour with some friends, I'll say, you know, if you can go at your own pace, that would be better. But I understand if there's an objective and you guys are on a time crunch and you gotta get somewhere by a certain time and you can't fit that in, then that's okay. But just trying to nudge everybody towards spending as much time in the right intensity zones as possible so that they've got a well balanced engine.
In terms of the actual metabolic demands of the downhill, is it driven by adrenaline? I mean, your upper body's pumping, your lower body's pumping, right? As you're exerting the impact. It's just I haven't taken a look at research, but what's driving the metabolic demands? Is it adrenaline? All of that together that's pushing the heart rate. Is it similar to skiing where there's eccentric strength on the legs? Go ahead into that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So firstly, don't forget that there's gonna be bouts of sprinting on the bike, right? You're not just pointing and then just bouncing down the hill on your shocks, right? So there's gonna be sprint intervals in there. More or less depending on the course, and so that's going to be a big contributor to heart rate elevation and elevated breathing, right? That's gonna kick in. But until you're about a minute in, that it's gonna take a while for the heart rate and the breathing to catch up to the level of exertion, right? So I think being able to keep the adrenaline down when you're getting ready at the start gate is probably a big factor in being able to manage your effort from top to bottom, right? So delaying the onset of that like maximal heart rate, maximal breathing for as long as possible. And so obviously to do that, and other ways that you can delay that would be by having a super strong aerobic base so that you can be clearing all those byproducts, right? Clear your pyruvate out. And then again, you kind of come back to localized fatigue. And that's when we're talking about the rider's strength base, but also their skill, their ability to execute and stay smooth, because just like skiers, like, a good skier is going to exert significantly less energy on the same downhill run as a novice will, purely because of their ability to flow, their ability to, and that's also where the strength ties back in again, because your ability to absorb or to push or to maintain flow, or if you have the ability to pull and make a 20-foot gap as opposed to having to ride over 3 rocks in the middle, then that's going to give you a significant advantage in terms of your energy expenditure and your ability to still be executing when you get to the bottom. So it really does all tie in together. And I find that I spend a lot of my time thinking about like that. It becomes quite blurred. Quite often as a strength coach, you'll really delineate. You've got your energy systems over here and you've got your strength over here. But actually that's when your mixed modal strength execution under exhaustion can become a little bit more justifiable and relevant. And I spent a lot of my time with doing rugby S&C strength, staying away from that and trying not to get into that whole kind of messy gray area in the middle. But I'm seeing that it's more and more relevant the more time I spend around mountain biking.
One of my own experiences in working with skiers is I think it back to training the metabolic element. And, my initial design had like 6 different exercises in a long circuit. And then pretty soon now I'm like one exercise, really simple, And I mean, has that been your experience too, where you try to get everything in there, and then as you've matured and cut the stuff out and identified, if that's the case, tell me kind of what that initial circuit looked like as you're doing the metabolic conditioning, and kind of where you've evolved to, and kind of what you're finding working now, and specifically to train metabolic conditioning for a downhill run.
How's it evolved? I think it's always evolving for me, and it evolves with the athletes that you're working with too. As their ability improves. There was a time with a lot of folks where you couldn't, just with individual ability picking up as you go along, where you couldn't expect somebody to throw in body weight pull ups during a metabolic circuit at the end, right? But as their ability progresses, then you can, right? As that capacity comes up. I think that you were kind of alluding to the fact that you're maybe achieving more by doing less now. I think that being conscious of the time constraints within the design of the Metcon and leaving yourself room to progress it week to week is important too. Being conscious of, okay, well, if this is a 30-second effort, then which energy system are we able to tap into here, and how far can we push that duration out before it becomes something else is important. But I think in terms of like, paradigm shifting evolutions, I don't think I've had one yet, but bear with me. I could be somewhere different in a year or two.
On a downhill run, I guess metabolically, is there any rest, or is it? I mean, are you going hard for 3 to 5 minutes?
Yeah,
I mean,
you'll find.
So there's a little bit of rest. So you could do a little bit of interval training in your metabolic design, then conditioning design.
Yes, but I think I think the intention is to build out a solid, capacity to go the balls out for your 4 minutes. But
yeah,
absolutely, because you're within that 4 minutes, you're gonna be elevated heart rate, 90% of your max heart rate from top to bottom, or the majority of. Plus, you need to have the ability to, like I said before, you're going to have the ability to pull for the 20-foot gap, which is going to be almost like performing a clean.
When you say
right?
pull for a 20, what does that mean? You're pulling the bike to jump.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay,
You're pre-compressing the suspension before you hit the lip of that, and then you're exploding up. And what's one of the reasons we spend so much time doing cleans in the gym with the mountain bikers is that direct transfer to it's you push your feet down into those pedals hard as you if you've ever tried to do a bunny hop on a bike. Still a work in progress for me, but I get the biomechanics of it well enough to know that if you can clean well, you're going to be able to pull harder.
4 minutes all out is a long time.
Yes, it is.
That's a long time. What is your if I was to say, okay, what's your favorite Metcon design right now, if that you've seen that you had real success with in terms of working these athletes? What's the design like in specific? Like, these exercises, this duration, what would be in that design?
Yeah. Okay, so this week I was doing the progression we're at was an every 3 minutes on the minute. We do a 10 cal max-ish effort on an assault bike, which would be about 30 seconds for most of them. We did the previous block, we were doing max 8-second efforts, and I was able to figure that 10 cals was about the right number to get them working but repeatable. They'd go from there. We'd have some pull-ups were in there, and then we'd get into like a Swiss ball push-up, and then like an oblique, sort of a modified kind of Copenhagen plank with some side crunch in there. Throw those in, and the guys would be just about pulling for about 20 seconds rest before their next block would come up, right?
Before that would come around, right? Yeah.
So that's
and how many rounds are you doing to that?
That would have been 5.
5 rounds. So 15 minutes total work.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, and the intention there is just to work and clear and be ready to work again with execution through upper body, right? So that fatigue's going to pick up. You're going to have that localized fatigue accumulating, but you're still going to have to be able to execute your reps. And I'm a fan of, bring in some bands and make sure you can still execute those pull-ups when things get ropey at the end. But yeah, that was sort of flavor of the week for the last.
It would seem that assault bike, just looking at it with the upper body push and pull, and the lower body, is about as sport specific as you can get for that event, right?
Yeah, I haven't had anybody convince me otherwise on that with the assault bike right now, and especially do you guys have you got them at your gym, hey? Do you guys have the Rogue
I
One?
was never a fan of assault bikes. So I never got into them.
I don't know anybody who's a fan of them, but yeah,
Yeah.
they're certainly effective for us. I've spent time trying to figure out if I can do some VO2 max. So we just got some VO2 max, some gas testing equipment at the gym, and I'm looking forward to playing with that to see if we can get a VO2 max protocol set up on
On
that.
an assault bike. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
if someone's done that before. That'd be interesting. Because can you adjust the resistance on those, or you'd have to push the athlete to go harder? I think, right?
it's just cadence that you can
Just
that's the only
cadence, right?
variable on there. Yeah. But in terms of a cyclical upper and lower body, like that's the biggest tap I can find into somebody's cardiovascular system looking around most gyms these days.
The only other one I have seen was the Versa Climber.
Yeah, yeah.
Versa Climber, I've done like 10-second intervals on those, like three guys, and we're all gassed. Versa
I've never
Climber is
never
pretty
had to
good.
play on one, but
Yeah, we had one of those one time. We messed around with it. Tell me about the in terms of your aerobic base development, minute based, mode specific to cycling. Am I missing anything there?
so having a balanced power profile, I think, is important. But like a lot of us will jump onto you do like an FTP test, like what's the most power you can put out in about 20 minutes.
So you're programming it based on power. Then go ahead.
Yeah. Whenever somebody has the equipment to do that, we can also get people to go work it off heart rate, where we'll get them to take their average heart rate for the second 10 minutes of a 20-minute effort, and that'll give them roughly their heart rate at FTP. And that's a really good snapshot for us to start with, and just a real good kind of catch-all. Making sure that we've got good capacity at longer duration efforts, going truly aerobic, and then also trying to divide up those shorter efforts is important too, so that people are not just good at that 20-minute domain, right? So yeah, we'll program pretty polarized. Like I'm a big fan of just like making your slow and your fast, but we got to be a little bit more nuanced than that for the demands of the sport. And a lot of riders that I'll work with are just folks who want to go out and have fun riding trails, and you got to be pretty varied and well balanced to do all those things well too. Because if I go out the back of my house here and I want to go the hard way up to the top of the trails, then I can be pretty red line from start to finish for a good 45 minutes. So just having that low and slow doesn't always, or I guess never really covers all the bases.
When you're programming your slow and you're using, I'm assuming that you're using power, not heart rate for slow. So you're doing like you get your FTP, your functional threshold power, and you're saying, okay, I want you to go for an hour at 70% of your functional threshold power on a power meter. Is it something like that
Yeah,
you
hear me out.
use?
I can pull it up right here.
I've done a little bit of power training before, and I think that's what I use. I can't remember the percentages. I think I was just following, what they usually do for heart rate, but it could be wrong. It's been a while since I looked at that program.
Yeah, I've just done a bunch. Just did a bunch this morning. Well, I can't find it right now, but it'll be about 70%, I would imagine. And I think one of the important things about that is, a lot of people will jump on the bandwagon when they hear that they can just work easy for a long time, and that's going to make them fitter. Like some people will really like that, but giving them a little reminder that you want to work as close to that threshold as you can without going over it in order to get the most bang for your buck, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where really having those zones comes in handy. And heart rate does work great, especially for the long durations. It just falls short when you start to ask people to do shorter intervals, because there's that lag, right? So you're never really sure what you're doing. So if you're working with heart rate,
When you say it's a lag, it takes a while for the heart rate to get up, and so if you
yeah,
say
yeah.
go 10 seconds, you start hard. Right, go ahead. Okay, good.
There's a difference between what your legs are putting out and what your heart rate is doing, right? It's going to take a while for that chain reaction to happen, for your breathing and your heart rate to elevate.
Are your pros running with power meters on their mountain bikes?
I don't see it too much. No, I thought that I would.
Yeah, you seem like you would. Yeah.
I don't know what I expect the cross country racers probably will, but not too much for the gravity guys. Not that I've seen anyway. And I'm usually taking a pretty good look, because some of these guys are running some sweet
Yeah, yeah. I bet they're running $20,000 bikes. Tell me about. You say you're a fan of power cleans, a
Yeah,
power clean or cleans.
yeah.
Either I suck at them, I suck at teaching them. Every athlete I've worked with, I mean, if I have 10 men in a room, three of them can do power cleans well. Joe Ken wrote an entire book just how to do the power clean because it's so hard to teach. Louis Simmons says just do jump squats. It does everything the power clean does, and it's friggin' less complicated. You're a fan of cleans. I think I understand the pull side of it. Do you use hang cleans, hang squat cleans, power cleans? What are you doing for your clean work? Dumbbells, everything.
Yeah, all of it really. The crux of a good clean, I think, like if you want to actually get good at cleans, you got to be able to front squat. You got to be able to rack the bar on your shoulders, because otherwise you're going to run up against the brick wall as soon as you get to 50% body weight, 75% body weight, and your wrists just don't want to support that weight anymore, right? So that in itself is the usual sticking point with bikers especially, and all kinds of athletes. Like the amount of times I've had front squats in a program and I've heard everybody going, my wrists, I don't think I've got the flexibility to do this one, and I'm just like, and it's repetitive, but it's amazing how if you can force front squats in there for 3 or 4 weeks, all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, no, I kind of get it now, right? So you can give them the mobility work to get their shoulders externally rotating a little bit better and try and limber up as well as you can before you get in there. But that's the start. And so I really like to get people front squatting and then working on a like a high hang, a high pull from a hang, so they can just get that power impetus. And then if you can get that high pull and you can front squat, then it's not too much of a jump to get them segueing towards that catch, right? That's been relatively successful for me. That one of those comments I made earlier on about like how I like people to be good enough to get going and then spend time with it to gain their proficiency, right? You don't have to be perfect to get it going. I love having my eyes on it to make sure everybody's safe, but never run into any issues with it. And then I think it's a great exercise. I'm probably biased because of the rugby background, right? We spent a lot of time cleaning and front squatting in rugby, and so I'm a big believer in those as big strength builders and big athletic needle movers, right?
Right, right. Yeah. Do you mess around with like loaded box jumps or anything like that to build power? It seems to me that because of the pulling movement that's specific to that sport, those aren't going to transfer as well as the power clean, but I could be wrong.
No, I could see. I was actually thinking about loaded box jumps last week, but we don't have enough weight vests at the gym right now for me to get a whole class through on it. But certainly on an individual basis, I'd like to play with some loaded box jumps for sure.
We've done them with barbells or with the dumbbells and with vests, but you'll be swinging the dumbbells. I would just to
Yeah,
cheat. So
yeah, yeah. I can see that.
any exercise you avoid, like deadlifts, coaches avoid deadlifts,
Mm.
chat bar deadlifts, anything you avoid just because you haven't had luck with it. Like I never teach jerks because I can never do a jerk and never teach it, so we don't do jerk. We just do push press. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I understand the jerk. Yeah, jerk can be challenging, technically difficult, and probably just one of those things where the difficulty slash risk might outweigh the benefit, right? So it's always a question of balancing those two things out. I love deadlifting personally. I have always felt happy deadlifting, and I encourage my clients and my athletes to deadlift. But you got to be okay pushing stuff to one side if it doesn't work for somebody. Having said that, like, I mean, what's a more functional human movement than reaching down and picking something up off the floor, right? So is it okay to say we're not going to do that? I don't really think that's okay. Like, pepper it in, make it easy, make it light, but make sure that somebody has the ability to get down there and pick it up.
Is there anything that anything that you avoid or that you haven't had luck with that maybe other coaches would use,
Yeah,
or you're open to everything?
yeah, I skirted that one, didn't I? I wouldn't say I'm up on everything. It's more likely that I just can't think anything off the top of my head, right?
No worries.
It might. It'll probably come to me 2 minutes after we finish our call.
Yeah, no worries. I was going to ask you about grip strength. Certainly, that's an
Mm.
issue. And do you do any focused grip strength training? I've done a lot of work with grip, just for the climbers I've worked with. I mean, do you
Yeah,
like? Go ahead.
yeah, I do. I do. So I think that carries and hanging are probably the two main ways that it gets in there. So I find that it's sort of it's just a part and parcel of working in the gym, is picking heavy stuff up and putting it down and holding on to things. You can dive into something and make it a specific grip strength exercise if you like, and it would probably find a good place as a finisher, or down there with your upper body, your core isolation, those sorts of things. And then, probably coming from a climbing background, like, you're always talking about these, the specific elements of dexterity that are involved with grip strength too, right? Like, it's not just about being able to hold on to something that's a handle for 3 minutes or do a dead hang. But so one drill I really like just for building up forearm wrist flexor strength is like a barbell roll. So we'll get the barbell up in the squat rack, kettlebell at the bottom, and tie a heavy like power band around there and just roll that up and down. That's great. I started working with a young racer a couple months ago. And no, just a month ago. And he's got some hand issues that mean that he's got both of his brakes on one side of his handlebar, because he can't brake with the other hand. So we're doing some work on that. And so he's a remote client. So I sent him down to his local climbing gym and said, though, these are the guys for all the climbing grip gimmicks, right? Like, I love rooting around the climbing stores here in Squamish they've got you guys have the best gloves and the best grip training equipment. And one of the things we're talking about specifically was not just, can you squeeze and hold, but can you squeeze and hold with 2 fingers and extend, right? And then can you do the opposite, right? Can you make sure that you can complete flexion and extension on the same hand, under load for an increasing amount of reps, and just going into that amount of detail with it, because it is quite specific.
That reminds me, I can't remember what it was, but for some reason my memory escapes me. But worked with world champion snowmobilers, and early in the season, they get a lot of thumb fatigue. I
I
forget
bet.
what we did. We've done quite a bit of work on grip strength and progression, and I haven't done this yet. Or maybe we just did a mini study on it, but we're looking at the transfer just from dead hang intervals
Mm-hmm.
to other elements of grip strength, because there's nothing easier than a dead hang interval, right? You can do an assessment. You can actually do an assessment and then do a percentage based progression based on their time. We've done that with like front planks to build front plank strength. But I can't remember if we're doing that too. It's a more specific. I don't know. I've done a with climbers. I've done a campus board dead hang, which is just fingers progression. But I don't think we did a prior assessment. We definitely did a progression where we just did just increased the rounds or the time without doing an assessment, pre and post assessment. You need the assessments, I think, to
Do you
get
find
the. Go ahead.
Do you find that the compliance is pretty good with folks if you give them like a dead hang time progression, and you'd say, okay, well, you guys can do a 2-minute dead hang, so this week you're going to do 40 seconds and 20 seconds rest for 4 reps or whatever it is, and then you're just progressing that out by 5 to 10 seconds a week. Is everybody kind of like engaged, and they're like, yeah, sure, I'm on board. I'm gonna put that time in, no problems.
They hopefully they do what they tell me, what I
Yeah,
tell them. Right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I find that if you're able to take and individualize it, which you can do if you do an assessment, it's a little bit difficult on a time based assessment, because then guys can't all start and finish at the same time, rather than a weight based assessment.
Yeah, and they can't
For
do their own
example,
stuff, right?
right, because some guy might be hanging on there longer. But if you had like let's say you did a farmers, or let's say you just did a friggin' deadlift bar hang for time, or a trap bar hang for time, and you didn't do it based on time, you did it based on strength. So how much can you hold for a minute? Although that would suck to do that assessment, right?
Yeah,
You
it
wear
wouldn't be a
out
fun day.
fast.
You
Yeah,
have
you
to
can
get it
kind of see
right.
my mind. I'm trying to think all this through, but yeah, it'd probably just be easier to do a dead hang and then do it based on time rather than weight, because you could progress weight that was individualized. That reminds me, I was going to ask you about. Do you have strength standards for your mountain bikers, like a relative strength standard, or do you have an assessment, a strength? You said you already do a your own mobility assessment. How about on the strength assessment? What are your standards, and what exercises do you use?
So the standards are not in stone, but with everybody, when I get them, whether they're a mountain biker or a racer, or I'm always thinking, and coming back to deadlift, like what how can we relate your strength to your body weight? And so I always like to talk to people about, okay, we're gonna get you deadlifting your body weight. Like that's our first body weight target to hit. Once we got that, we're gonna try and hit a body weight squat and a body weight bench, right?
And
Now,
that's a back squat, right? Body weight back squat.
yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
just for simplicity's sake. Now with the guy, the athletes, then I can tell you that we see riders lifting, 2x body weight on the back squat pretty regularly. Now these guys aren't big guys, they'll be anything from sort of 150 to 75 pounds. But still, I guess this comes back to that kind of emerging generation of guys and girls who've had good gym education coming up through school and through sports, where they're able to do that and execute pretty good form under load. I'm always surprised. My bench press is terrible. Like I've always had a hell of a time getting my bench press much past 200 pounds, and I've always hidden behind the fact that I'm a tall, long guy, right? But I see guys. There's a guy down at the gym here, Ryan Griffith, who's a racer for Pivot this year, and he's had a broken ankle, so he's been in the gym a lot, and he's probably got a couple inches on me, definitely like way more lanky than I am, and he's pushing way more than 200 pounds right now, and he's weighing way less than 200 pounds. So yeah, the guys are getting pretty strong. I think standards are an important thing to have in mind in terms of progression, because I don't think a lot of us can always remember what our latest 1RM is. But I think that in terms of perhaps it's just this sport, there isn't enough S&C data in pro mountain biking for us to know that. I know that if you go online, you'll find a ton of information on what Olympic track cyclists can do, and maybe some Tour de France teams might have released some data too in terms of their strength numbers. But in terms of standardized population, this is where you should be. We don't really have that.
What about upper body pull standard? Is there something you're looking for? Body weight pull ups or something?
Yeah, I think body weight pull ups, weighted pull ups. So I think once you can get yourself up towards 10 body weight pull ups, you should start thinking about adding a little bit of weight on there.
So what you're looking at then is initial of a body weight deadlift, which is fairly easy, but then 2 times body weight back squat, body weight bench press, and then 10 pull-ups would kind of be what you're looking for. In terms of durability, do you assign, do you think in terms of durability for your bikers, strength equals durability, or are there other things that you're worried about that mobility equals durability? Do you have I guess I have a durability equation. Do you have one?
Oh, you do? I'd be super interested to hear that, but I guess I got to go first. First of all, I think durability is kind of the be all and end all. I don't think you're never gonna be making the long term gains that you should if you're not durable, and therefore avoiding injury, avoiding hiccups, avoiding training interruptions, right? So durability is always my first point of priority. And then when it comes to performance, I think that always seeking to improve, to push numbers, to improve movement quality as we go. Where was I going with the other thing? You were talking about a formula. Yeah, no, go on, tell me your formula.
Yeah, I guess by far the most important component of durability is event specific fitness.
Okay.
So if you're fit, because if you're not fit for the event, then you're gonna get in trouble somehow. And then after that, it would be max effort strength, or in our terms, relative based on body weight for the athletes that we work with, which aren't strength athletes. And then after that, a small part, like less than 5% for me is mobility and flexibility. I haven't seen returns from mobility and flexibility in terms of durability, but so that it'd be event specific strength or event specific fitness, and then relative strength would be the 2 major components. And it'd probably be 60%, 60 or 75% event specific fitness, and then another 25% or so, 20% relative strength, and then after that, the rest minor would be mobility.
Yeah.
It seems that for your athletes, are there any other than are there any overuse injuries for um, downhill mountain biking that are common, like low back and other issues for road cyclists, or is it most of the injuries are going to be impact injuries? I assume we spoke about that before, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can talk about like upper limb tendonitis, right? Elbow, wrist tendonitis can be
Oh,
a thing.
really? Yeah, right there. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So probably quite different. I'm imagining that the stuff you were dealing with your snowmobilers was similar to what we'd see with dirt bikers, right? Like you had more like elbow tendonitis, that kind of stuff, or
Yeah, there was one of my pro snowmobilers. Yeah, he would call it his vajelbo because he had one elbow you could never do pull-ups with, right? And so we'd have to work around that. Yeah, that is interesting. He did have that, and you're right. Are you seeing that in downhill mountain bikers too? I assume you would, but maybe
yeah,
not.
yeah. I think off the top of my head, it's probably more hand and wrist based, and I'm wondering if the forces involved there are just perhaps you need to. I'm not familiar enough with dirt biking, but I'm assuming that the pulling the weight of the machine obviously is a lot heavier, right? So perhaps the forces are gonna affect you a little further up the chain than they would with mountain biking, where it could just be more in terms of repetitive manipulation of the hand under load, right?
Have you had any athlete who came in and trained with you, who was a pro, spend a season with you or an off season getting strong, and then decided the next year that it wasn't for them, that they were just going to do, they're going to go ski for that, and not train in the gym.
Like change your career. Oh, you mean like no, I wouldn't say
In
that.
other words, they're like they didn't see the benefit from it.
No, never had that. Sometimes there's guys and girls who I think there's a trainer, there's a coach for everybody out there, and you gotta have the right person. But usually, once I spend a season with somebody, like they're in, right, like you're there. So usually, if I'm not going to jive with somebody, it's going to be pretty apparent in a couple months, right? But no, fortunately, no. There's one guy who you guys might have seen it. It's a pretty well known Instagram clip of one of our guys who was he's a privateer downhill racer. He was at one of the downhill races in Austria. I forget which one, but maybe it was Italy. He had one of the more spectacular crashes you'll ever see, where he came flying off the top of this wooden wall ride thing. And fortunately for him, it's become a real viral moment and helped him to like pump the tires on his online business. So he works with a lot of other athletes. So it became really handy for him. But yeah, that was the one guy who came back after a year and decided that maybe World Cup downhill racing wasn't for him.
Oh yeah, I see the guys, who are doing that in urban environments.
Yeah,
Oh my god, I'm like,
a lot of sharp edges, eh?
oh yeah, and hard edges. Plyos, do you need plyo work?
Yeah, lots of plyo work. I think, and that just comes down to that the dealing with gravity and having to absorb eccentrics. I'm usually pretty progressive with how I'll program them.
Can you go into that, into details of how you would progress? Maybe just choose one exercise and how you progress. Is it
Yeah.
based on volume, loading? How do you do it? How do you progress your
So we
plyos?
went from I want to get guys good at handling like ground impact, right? So
Yeah.
um, block one was seated, the box jump from seated position, right? So we're exploding up, we're pushing into the ground, generating force from a 90-degree knee, and then obviously landing without too much acceleration because we're landing at the top of a box rather than coming back down to the floor. So that's our entry point there. At the same time, we'd be working like some banded ankle hops. Just you kind of get your band up over pull-up bar and use that to deload the body a little bit, and then start to hop through the ankle, get the Achilles and the foot.
Kind of like a triphasic stuff I've seen before. Go ahead. Yeah, I've never
Yeah,
done
yeah.
that, but go ahead.
So getting our tissues conditioned, right? Because the amount, especially with the amount of like my Tuesday Thursday morning class is mostly 40-year-old guys, right? So what's the likelihood of somebody blowing an Achilles when we throw in plyos straight away? Like pretty high. So plenty of that. Then we'll work on some, and I always call them hurdle hops, but usually the first time we bring them in, like a rear foot elevated hurdle hop will actually be a rear foot elevated imaginary hurdle hop, right? So I'm just like jump over this line and land with stability through the knee and through the ankle. We get through a block of that, and then what we're into now starting to get a touch more like bike specific is doing like a split stance hurdle hop with a switch in the middle. So we'll a little bit like you guys have had that touch jump touch for years, right? So
Yeah.
that was probably the first MTI program I followed. And so what we're doing here is we're mimicking bike stance, right? Right foot forward, left foot back. You're jumping over a hurdle. You're landing. You're cushioning. It's not a quick rebound. You're gonna cushion, land soft, and then you've switched feet in the air. So left foot's now forward, right foot's back. And you're back up over the top, and so you're controlling your interaction with the floor as you land, right? And that's the current progression that we're at now. I quite like the idea of bringing that into like an elevated platform. So we're working up and down and dealing with a bigger gravitation, bigger accelerational force down to the ground for the next block. So I got to find a way to crowbar that in for next week.
The progression you described was a progression of more difficult exercises based on impact. In terms of set and reps, are the set and the reps about the same, or number of sets and reps? I guess the total volume for those exercises, and are you hitting like each? So the total volume is about the same. Just the exercise is the one thing that you're progressing.
Yeah, depending on with the I'm trying to think with the hurdle hop that we had, that kind of intermediate step. The idea with that was that the guys and girls were going to start off being a little bit sloppy with those because they're now having to work on one foot. So I'm looking for a quality improvement, probably through the same amount of reps on a 3-week progression there. Yeah.
Have you done any eccentric or isometric training?
I'm a big fan.
Or strength?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
big fan of eccentric training. Most commonly push-ups and pull-ups. I really like an eccentric push-up to help people learn position, right? To get them to overcome any kind of dyskinesis that's going on in their shoulder. Some people have a hard time fighting against winging, or one shoulder will retract or one will elevate more than the other. So as soon as we give somebody time to feel and think about what's going on, you kind of get these magic results where all of a sudden they're able to figure stuff out for themselves, which is cool. The eccentric pull-up is a great way to segue and make progress on a full, concentric eccentric pull-up. So if somebody doesn't have a full body weight pull-up in the tank yet, but I can tell they're getting pretty close with their banded efforts or their assisted efforts, and then we'll segue to body weight eccentric, and then we can also use that some loaded eccentrics for stronger folks who want to add a few more bodyweight pull-ups to their total. And then when it comes to lower body stuff, I'm almost always programming with like a 3 or a 2 eccentric tempo. I really can't. I don't like watching anybody drop quickly into a squat, really, unless there's no load on them. And so really playing around with tempo is something that we'll do a lot of, especially through like introductory blocks with new clients or the start of a movement quality block with a returning client who's coming back for their off-season work. If you can get somebody to even taking a movement like do an RDL to row and forcing somebody to pause at the bottom of an RDL to complete their row is really going to help them to sharpen up their hinge and their spinal stability at the bottom of that movement when we're asking them to hang out there and complete another task with just that extra exposure, that extra time under tension for their hamstrings and their posterior chain.
Got it. What's your biggest mountain bike programming mistake that you've made?
Probably on myself. When we first moved up to Squamish, I was super excited. I'd kind of been biking for, I guess, 3 or 4 years when we moved up to Squamish, and I was one of the reasons we moved here was for the mountain biking. And so I entered the first race that was coming up, and I just recently kind of retired from playing rugby, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be an endurance athlete now. So I phoned up a friend of ours who was an endurance coach at the time, still is, Jen Seeger, and she helped me out with some programming. I said, it's okay, I'll do my own strength as we go along. About a month before the race came in, I had a little panic about my conditioning, and so I just pushed all the strength training to one side and thought I'll just put that extra time into more time on the bike. And lo and behold, when race day came around, the first hill came up and I had no legs, right? So I think that was my biggest mistake, but a really good one to learn. Like, it's been one of the more enjoyable, like personally and intellectually challenging parts of being a strength trainer and working in fitness was taking me and trying to push myself in a different direction, where I've been trying to be big and heavy and fast and win collisions for 15 years. And all of a sudden I wanted to try and get up a hill with some efficiency and enjoy it instead of huffing and puffing and redlining for the whole thing.
What was your rugby playing weight, and what are you now?
I'd have been 235 at my heaviest. Heavy, but not. I was looking at the weights of some of those guys in the Super Bowl last weekend. Did you see that stat that came up?
I didn't. No, I didn't watch it.
I think it must have been the like the offensive line or something. But the Super Bowl one, the average height and weight was 6'3", 245 pounds, and then Super Bowl whatever this one was 50, 60, I don't know. Average height was 6, and they were 350. So anyway, I thought I was a pretty big guy. I'm not. So yeah, 235, 6'3", and now I'm a little porky right now. I'm 220 still, but I've tried my best to get under 200 pounds, but it's not easy. So about 210 is my happy place to be, and when I'm there, I'm usually feeling pretty good. Yeah.
Is there a way to train uphill biking other than just uphill biking intervals?
Well, I think that strength to weight ratio, whenever vertical movement comes into play, like the steeper it gets, the more your strength to weight ratio matters. So yeah, I would argue, yeah, being strong matters a ton. Interestingly, like one of the things that I find it isn't spoken about enough in mountain biking, like energy development. When somebody's on a spin bike, they're doing an indoor class. If they're just taking your regular like trainer road or Zwift program, the recommended cadence is going to be something like 90-95 RPMs, right? Because that's what works for most folks when they're on a spin bike. But when we're on a mountain bike, you're almost never going to be hitting that kind of cadence. And if you were, you'd be bouncing around like crazy through your suspension, right? So we tend to try and get riders training at 75 to 85 RPMs, which is going to force them to use a little bit more mechanical strength from their legs, through every pedal stroke.
Because they'll be at a higher, or they'll be at a bigger gear, right?
Yeah, the torque is
Right.
there, and you need
Torque
that
is.
support as well. You need the support of a bigger gear to ride in technical terrain, because you don't want to be bouncing around so much. You want to feel planted and balanced on your bike. And also, if you're in technical terrain and you're spinning, that's every time your pedal hits the bottom of the stroke, you're running the risk of a pedal strike, right? So there's a whole
Interesting. Yeah.
bunch of reasons to operate on a slightly lower cadence and have more support.
Wow. Thanks for that. That's interesting. I had a question about, I guess, tech in your gym. I mean, it seems like you're pretty old school like me, but force plates, some of them new velocity training gizmos. You experimented with any of that stuff?
No, and I'm always pretty skeptical about it. Like, just in terms of the ability to apply and make use. There's a gym in town with a force plate here. I don't want to know how much they spent on it, but you can tell from their marketing that they're in a hurry to try and get it paid off, right? So I've made some purchases in my, that like we bought an in-body machine, for body composition years ago, and it definitely hasn't paid for itself yet. But if you want to buy one, I know a guy. So yeah, like in terms of tech, like it's got to be applicable. I didn't shell for the VO2 equipment that just came into our gym, but I'm gonna play with it and I'll get proficient on it. What I like about this unit is that it's mobile, right? You can take it out and you can use it in the field. You don't have to. I worked in a physiology lab for a couple of years there, where we were doing the lactate tests and running stuff through these big machines, and it's super cool that you can take that out onto the field now. And I think that's handy. That's really useful. But how many times a year, like how difficult is it to do the testing? How many times a year is it practical to come back and retest? And if you're not going to be retesting frequently, what's the point in doing it, right? So things need to really make sense. And I think as a guys in our position, we need to be really selective about not getting lured into the bells and whistles. Same as a consumer, right? Like it's easy to think that you need to go and get the power meter or whatever it is. And if it's not going to be really useful for you, then you should probably think twice about getting it.
Yeah, I am kind of interested in one of those velocity barbell gizmos and trying to mess around with that programming. Although what I've seen from it,
Is that the cable that attaches to the end?
yeah, I think they have like a cable, and you can also like maybe there's like a camera system, like you like put above the rack somehow, and maybe a little gizmo you attach to the barbell. And I understand it correctly now that they'll just use them to look for overtraining. So if you're not hitting your speed, then they lower the weight on you. They don't use it to actually progress your. I did remember going to a Exis like that is athletes performance at that time
Mm.
thing, and they had Kaiser machines, and so the it was a big cable system, and so they would actually use power. Same type of idea, but they could adjust the power so you could progress on power, kind of like you do on a bike, right? That would be
The
kind of
pneumatic
cool.
one, right? The
Yeah,
pneumatic resistance.
pneumatic. Yeah,
It'll measure
that
your
was way over
flow.
my. It looked like way too much maintenance and money for me. We have used, we did purchase VO2 Max machine with the computer and everything. We didn't use it that much. We did get one of the little lactate gizmos, and I think they've come a long way. I'm probably going to get some of those and do some work. I just read a book on Norwegian training and how much the Norwegian endurance guys use those lactate things. That seems a little interesting. That's something you do in the field. I haven't heard of a VO2 machine you could take into the field with you. Probably have to look into that a little bit more. That sounds kind of interesting because all of a sudden, I mean, if you could do like I read one time where like high level triathletes will have a VO2 max for every discipline, one for so oh wow, that'd be really interesting if you could all of a sudden do that in the field for a VO2 max for uphill running or uphill skinning for ski mountaineers, or skimo athletes. That'd be kind of interesting to cool because then now all of a sudden they've got their exact heart rate for that mode, right? To be able to use. One thing I always wanted to try to do is to figure out if I could figure out some way to use power to train work capacity. So in other words, 5 minutes, you want to produce so much power, right? And then you could manipulate the loads and the distances and the exercises so that you could see if I'm doing power just on sprints, is that transferred over to kettlebell swings and box jumps, But I've never figured out a way to do that was efficient. CrossFit messed around with that a little bit before, but it was just never efficient because, like I'm at on a tall day 5'5". So I remember there's a dude. We did this had this one workout a long time ago. I called it open driving machine. It was a whole bunch of different shit together, but one of them was swings, and he would get ahead of me. He was about your size. And then we get the swings, I'd catch up to him, and I figure, how come I'm doing this? I'm swinging it, but it's a lot less distance, right?
Yeah.
So, right, so that matters for power, right? If we're both swinging a 20 kilogram kettlebell and we both swing at the same time, you're more powerful than me because the distance covered is more. So fucking complicated. But yeah, I really like the idea, but I've never done it yet. I have seen they've developed some kind of power stuff for running, but I don't know how effective that is. I think it involves a pedometer or something.
It's
Anyway,
in the
right.
isn't it?
Yeah. I spent a lot of money on some of these gizmos, and
It's
they always
fun.
end up
Hey,
we sell them.
and you guys do such a good job of doing your mini studies that I can see it being super applicable for you guys. So I think that's cool. Yeah. I'm still
Yeah,
waiting.
yeah.
I'm still waiting for a lab rat opportunity here, but I'm always thinking about it when I see the call go out. See if I can fit it in somewhere. But yeah, I look forward to joining in one day.
Let's go ahead and let's go. Almost done here. Any what coaches do you admire? Coaches you've learned a lot from?
Oh well, I got these written down here. Well, Alan Milway, he's kind of like the OG sports physiologist in mountain biking.
Okay.
English guy. He's been working with world champs for years. The fella whose gym I operate out of here, Joel Harwood, he's got a Blueprint Athlete Development there. That's the stable of pros that I'm working around at the gym every day. Learned a lot from him, especially like the on bike stuff, the real like craft and the intricacies and the nuances of mountain biking and racecraft and how the day lines up for the guys and all the details there. So he's been super great to work with. And then like on a wider basis, you've got guys like Dan John, who I've always enjoyed his writing. I like how simple he keeps everything, and common sense and straightforward. A lot of the stuff that Gray Cook did back in the day was quite foundational for me. I think just he did a good job of bringing everything together and making it quite simple in terms of a process of like, here's where you are and here's how we think you should be able to move forward, as a human. And books over here, we've got Joe Friel. He's got a bunch of cycling literature. It was what was a really good one was the book was The System. It's about Soviet periodization adapted for American strength coaches. Did you ever see that one?
I haven't. No, I'm gonna look it up though.
So it's a little older, and it was who the authors. I don't know these guys. Johnny Parker, Rob Panariello. Anyway, those guys were like, I think they were on the S&C team for the 49ers in the Joe Montana days. And they got all these old Soviet guys and were like picking their brains about, all the real world, like you talk about lab rats like that. The Soviet system had them right in abundance, right? So the ability to implement wave periodization for NFL players so they could continue to make gains during the season rather than just, try
Maintain.
not to get right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so that was super useful, and yeah, like tons of stuff. But those are the ones I kind of jotted down off the top of my head this morning.
All right, lightning round. Best total body lift.
Landmine clean and press.
One-handed
Anybody
or two-handed? One-handed, I
one
guess.
handed,
One-handed.
one
Yep.
handed. Yeah, I think
Wow.
easy to teach most people and get a lot out of it.
I'm not super familiar with that, but there's a twist in that.
You'd have a reverse grip on the
Got it.
pull, right?
Okay.
And then that catch is pretty straightforward. So
Best lower body press exercise.
front squat,
Best lower body pull.
deadlift. Not too fancy here.
Upper body press.
I like incline dumbbell bench press, shoulder
Why dumbbell?
friendly. Yeah, hits the right part. I like to kind of hit upper chest. I think people are, we cover off a lot of that like lower plane pushing through push-ups, right? So
Yeah.
I think you can develop upper angle chest pressing, pec major. Yeah.
You said it's get shoulder friendly. Are you allowing athletes to hold the dumbbells any way they want?
I'll usually direct people towards a 45-degree like hand position, and then that usually takes care of the if you move somebody, so if they're sitting up here and you move somebody's hands just to there, it's usually going to take care of their elbow position for us too, right? And then you've got that freedom. I love taking exercises like that and turning them into like a little bit of a mobility drill, like getting people to embrace the stretch at the bottom. Like I know it's a nice way to make sure we've got control through the full range for the joint, and also like we're going to get better hypertrophic effects by taking that stretch as well, right?
You had said earlier that if I understood correctly, you have at least one session where you've got a group of pro or semi-pro riders or amateur riders all together in one group. Is that right?
Yeah, there'll be a mixed ability levels. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Are they competitive with each other in the gym? I assume they are. And do you push
Yeah,
that?
but it's all pretty fun, Like there's a lot of shit talking, but we have a good time. Like it's two of the more enjoyable hours of my week. Yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
little
good for
fun.
you. Best upper body pull exercise.
Pronated pull up, strict, no kipping.
No kipping. Good man. Most overrated exercise or lift.
I think box jump. I like the box jump, but I think it's overrated, and because maybe I'm picking on 18-year-old men here, but like the amount of times you'll see usually unsupervised young men working out and just like trying to stack shit on top of the other shit and see how high they can jump, and sort of forgetting about the purpose of the movement, right? And there's two things you want to achieve with a box jump. The first one is ground interaction, and the second one is like how do you move your body through that space, right? Like, do you want to be pulling your knees up to your chin? Like there can be a time and a place for that. But if your intent is just to get as much force as you can into the floor, then it really doesn't matter how high that box is, right?
Most underrated exercise or lift.
I didn't write anything down for that one. What underrated exercise or lift? What's good? I guess I would come back to bench press. I think bench press has been, bashed on from certain parts of the health and fitness movement in the last few years, but especially the world I live in now, like it's really nice to have a carte blanche to do as much as we want of it, and it's a great it's great fun, and it's highly functional for mountain bikers, and I'm happily embracing it now. Maybe by the time I'm 50, I'll have a 250 bench press. I don't know. We'll see.
You ever do any decline bench press?
Not very often. No, I had a phase, and I really liked the way that felt. You know, like hitting that
Lower
lower
side. You,
chest.
you ever done in your meathead days a reverse grip bench press?
No, no. That would
I
Did I
tried
get
all
into
that shit.
a little bit?
I can't remember. I just remember doing it.
Oh, you know what? I should have we should give an honorable shout out to dips. I'm a big dips fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't have a bunch of athletes just can't do it because their shoulders anymore.
yeah. But we've got these like high planche bars, so you can do like a self assisted one,
Ah,
toes on the floor, and then it's a little finicky to try and teach people away from turning it into a push up. But if you can get it, then yeah, I think if you can manage the load and the resistance, either with some band assistance or feet on the floor, then I think you can ease people into opening up their shoulders pretty nicely with it. Like it.
yeah, it is kind of an interesting. It's almost like a decline bench press or a vertical press, just in the opposite
Yeah.
direction. Most overrated piece of equipment.
Notes are terrible here. They let me down. Oh no, I got them there. There we go. Overrated piece of equipment. Kettlebells.
I'm with you there. I think.
Controversial, right? No, you're with me.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I think. Because you can do anything. You can do anything you can do with kettlebells with a dumbbell, right?
It's a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and like that. I mean, they can be pretty or whatever, or like it's a bit trendy, isn't it? Like all the flow and swinging and all that kind of stuff. Like I'm all about what training adaptation are you getting from what exercise, right? And if there's not a clear answer for that, then I think there's a lot of kettlebell exercises that fit into that. Did you ever do any of those? I know On It did a bunch of like steel mace training, and they had
No,
these
no.
clubs.
I've seen those guys. They're always older guys. They don't wear shirts and they have lots of tattoos.
Yeah,
Swing
yeah.
those things around. No, I never done any of it. No.
I mean, I was super excited to go and learn how to use all these things, but it all just turned into choreography, and I'm like, it's like, what's the application? And if you have to like, you know, if you have to buy a DVD to learn the moves and all that stuff, then it's it's a little.
Yeah, there is one element. I do like kettlebell snatches. In fact, I did 200 snatches this morning,
Wow.
and there is an interesting element of strength cardio that you can do with kettlebells that maybe you could probably do with the dumbbells. I imagine it'll all be the same. Although a dumbbell snatch is different than a kettlebell snatch because you can't necessarily swing it that way. A swing should be about the same,
Mm.
but yeah, but I've done up to 1,000 kettlebell snatches like with the 16. I did 200 this morning with the 20. I worked up to 200 with the 24. My shoulders can't take it anymore. But yeah, they're and but I think I'm gonna work up like at a 16 to be able to go like 30 minutes straight. And it's just kind of an interesting because you can get a pause and rest at the top. It's an interesting way to get some endurance in, I guess. I'm still messing around with it, but I designed a high rep kettlebell snatch program. That's pretty cool. It's kind of fun, something different.
Yeah.
Lift your best at.
Yeah, probably deadlift. I mean, I can Turkish get up a pretty good weight. Like I'm pretty strong under. I guess I could do a dumbbell too, but under a kettlebell, right?
Even old guy like you with all that bench press in your shoulders still handle that Turkish get up.
Well,
Good for you.
maybe it's because I'm not very good at the bench press. Maybe this is why.
Maybe so.
Yeah, I like I I like the idea of just moving with fluidity underneath that heavy weight there, and I'm on the fence quite often about Turkish get-ups, about whether they're when are they necessary, and there's so much going on there that you can usually just cherry pick a couple elements from a movement like that and make it a little bit more surgical. But then yeah, like main list, probably the deadlift, right? Like I don't deadlift all year round, but I could probably get down there today and talk myself into pulling 400 off the floor if I had to.
Good for you. Good for you. Lift or exercise you suck at.
Well, we covered that one, bench press, right? Needs work.
Alex, thanks for your time today. Awesome stuff. Appreciate
Thank
you,
you.
man.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's really good to talk, and yeah, stoked to have the time. So thanks for having me.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Cool, buddy. Cheers.
Okay, cheers.